Good morning, everybody. Enter the stars. Welcome to the show. We're going to start out today's show with an update on the Hagia Sophia Museum being converted back into a mosque. Now, out of nowhere, just to be clear, we started talking about the Hagia Sophia a week before it hit the world stage. And why were we talking about it? Well, because before all these events unfolded, we had identified that this mosque was the one mentioned in iPet Goat 2. It was depicted in iPet Goat 2. And for those of you that don't know, that is what has appeared to be and what has developed into being an animated short film, 7 minutes long, that seemed to foreshadow many world events before they happened. So there are a lot of people with eyes on this mosque. There were a lot of people looking at it, different perspectives. And here we are 8 years into this, and we had discovered that the mosque is in fact the Hagia Sophia. What made this all very weird is that a week later, something very crazy happened with this mosque that catapulted it onto the world stage. Now, what adds to the mystery of this is that in iPet Goat 2, this mosque is obliterated by bombers. They fly overhead in the animation, and this dome right here crashes in. A young boy, a whirling dervish, emerges from the collapsed dome, spinning towards the moon. We talked about all the significance of what all that means in the previous video that we did about this mosque. Now, this is all documented on this channel, so you know that I'm not just making this up. In hindsight, we were talking about it. And for those of you that come to the channel, you know this. Now, we also noticed, before all this played out, that some Christians in this area were begging Trump to keep this as a museum instead of a mosque. You see, this thing has changed hands many times over the centuries since 500 AD when it was built. It was built as a Christian cathedral, and then it was taken over by Muslims. Then it was converted back into a museum, and which was a neutral designation, and now they're converting it back into a mosque. Erdogan is sending a message. Now, this letter that the Christians sent out to Trump, they sent out on the summer solstice eclipse. June 21st was the date of the article this year. Now, what was Trump doing at this time? Well, he was in Tulsa, remember? At the arena there, giving his inaugural speech for his campaign. Right? And we did a decode on that and the significance of that was smack dab in the middle of a racial history that many people want forgotten. And his speech was given just yards away from unmarked graves from Black Wall Street. So, Erdogan turned this back into a mosque, and now we have another update just days ago. These are Erdogan's words. He's getting very bold and he's taking a stand against an ally of the West. There you can read the headline there. And I'll read a little bit of this. The resurrection of the Hagia Sophia heralds the liberation of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Turkish presidency website says. This was July 11th. He vowed to liberate Al-Aqsa Mosque from the country that is the West's ally that shall not be named, after resurrecting the Hagia Sophia. This is unbelievable. This is what many would consider a threat. So this is setting all this up for exactly what was depicted in iPet Goat 2 with the collapse of this dome and etc., etc. So I wanted to give you guys that update who have been following this story. I want to thank the subscribers who have sent me these links to keep up with the story. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept up with it. So things are heating up in the East once again. Now, let's get into today's show. Let's make sure we're connected first. Appears as though we are. Great. All right, let's keep going with today's show. Now, first we're going to review. Now, we discovered that the smiley face eclipse under China, let's pull it up here, it seemed to mark the beginning of the CV spamdemic. Okay? And if you look here, here's the smiley face eclipse that went right underneath China on December 26th, 2019, the end of last year. We called this the Christmas Apollo birthday eclipse. Went right underneath China, and it seemed to kick off this entire thing with the CV. If you look at the dates here, our December 26th was China's December 27th. They're on the other side of the world. And look at what happened on December 27th. After having observed the elderly couple's CT scans were abnormal, they asked the couple's son to undergo a scan and found the same pattern. Working as a medical expert, blah, 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 during the SARS outbreak, they're aware of the signs of a suspected outbreak of infectious disease. Another patient, a merchant from the Hunan seafood wholesale market, arrived at the hospital with fever and cough that day, and the CT scan showed the same characteristics. All blood tests from the 4 patients indicated viral infection, and a further array of influenza-related tests came back negative. Wuhan Central Hospital received message from Vision Medicals that the BAL sample taken on December 24th contained a new kind of CV, and the patient was in quarantine. This, right as this eclipse was going overhead, is when CV was in its infancy, barely had been discovered, dovetailing perfectly in with the launch of the CV. Now, well, what does that have to do with the smiley face, Casey? Let me show you. Because if you look carefully, you will see the smiley face emerge. This is unbelievable. I can get this to work. There you see the smile below. Let's just draw it in. There you see the eyes. I'll just outline them. Lake 1, Lake 2, or if you're more of a technical person, we can just outline these 2 countries. Smile. Now, the world's governments told us to smile and look at the bright side of forced economic closures, crashing of the oil market, lockdowns, isolations, and school closures, quarantines. Then the summer solstice came. What happened during the summer solstice? Another eclipse on June 21st, the one we just talked about earlier in the show, when Trump was giving his inaugural campaign speech, and the Christians were begging him not to let the Hagia Sophia turn into a mosque. They sent a letter to him. And here again, the sad face under China. And in fact, this solar eclipse passed right over Wuhan. And look it's a sad face. And this is where it all began. So this is the cry later. And this was marked by riots, unrest, depression, anxiety, division. You notice how it's problem, reaction, solution. Bring us all together under something nice. And then create chaos. The smile now was the ice, because it was on and near Christmas. Cry later is the fire, because it was on the summer solstice, which would also relate back to Apollo. Now here's where things get interesting, because when you look at the dates, let me type it out for you. I couldn't believe this. 12, well, let's make that yellow. Sorry, guys. Let's go with yellow. Watch this. 12/26. 6/21. You can't make this up. The two dates of the two eclipses are mirrors of one another. Winter, 12/26, summer, 6/21. Now there's an extra 2 in there, but you get the point. The dates are mirrors of one another. Now, we then began to see the smiley face everywhere in pop culture, and it was symbolizing death and disease. And there were these mysterious get well balloons for people that were quarantined in their houses. Nobody knew who started the trend. It just appeared out of nowhere. These smiley face get well balloons. And it was across multiple countries. It wasn't just one country. There were some in Canada. There were some in Australia. And then we noticed that there were a bunch of vintage films that also contained the smiley face. And it always represented something going viral or out of control. Like in the film The Howling, where they left this smiley-faced calling card after they would infect someone with the blood of the wolf. We saw it in the film 2012 as well, on the refrigerator inside of basically this guy was a conspiracy theorist, played by Woody Harrelson inside his camper. You see the smiley face. We saw it in the film The Gremlins. Again, something multiplying out of control. Infection, disease. We saw smiley faces in Katy Perry's new music video. Basically talking, which had the subject matter of being locked in quarantine in a box and basically recreating our reality out of this situation that we're in, making it okay. All we got to do is recreate our reality. We can deal with this. We're in a box, who cares? You see the messaging. And then, of course, Charlie Chaplin's song that Lady Gaga sang, called Smile, as we were all locked in our homes together. Now, we then began looking at eclipse patterns as harbingers of worldwide change, signs in the heavens. And that when these eclipses cross each other, or they pair with others, as in the smile now, cry later, we understand that that means something. It's a sign in the heavens, which is the Bible says we're supposed to be looking at. Then we found that during Jesus' life, there were just 4 total eclipses. Remember that? There were 4 eclipses in his life total. And they seemed to be like a signal that he was coming. These 2 right here, look at these 2. These 2 happen in 6 and 2 BC. Many people agree that Jesus was born in 6 BC. This one happened October 23rd, which may have been after he was born. This one happened February 15th in 2 BC. So these crossing eclipses seem to be a harbinger of his birth. And we showed you how this cross also looks like a mark, like an X. And that is known as the Hebrew letter Tav, T-A-V. And we notice that these crossing eclipses, along with the other 2 that happened during his life, seem to depict visually the crucifixion, which is the cross, the ascension. There's another one that's not on this image here, but the ascension, which goes right over where he was actually crucified, and the firmament. There's another one that swoops over the top of this here. Those were the only 4, and they seem to tell the entire story of his life. Now, here's where the plot thickens. The Arabic equivalent of the Tav is what is called the Teh, T-E-H. That's funny because for some reason, when I type, and I've been doing this for years, you guys could look back at my comments over the years. Didn't do it on purpose, but what I would do is type the word the, T-H-E, but I would get it backwards all the time. So it would get typed out as T-E-H. And because I respond to so many comments and try to engage with you guys on my channel, a lot of times I just wouldn't fix it. I'm like, they know what it is. It's the word. But in actuality, what I was typing out was a foreshadowing of a discovery that we are making right now. The Teh, T-E-H. It's also called the Tau, T-A-U, or the Tav. It has many names and many forms. But in Arabic, it is a smiley face. Wow. Now, dovetail that into everything we just talked about, and there's something to all this. There it is there, depicted in these forms here. Here's one form that looks like a sad face. But in my mind, this is the path of the eclipses. Now, here's where the plot thickens even more. If it couldn't get any more crazy, right? When you look at this word, or this letter is what it is, it's an alphabet letter. Pull this up here. Here's what's called Wiktionary. Now, I didn't make this up. I didn't stretch it. This is just what's on file right here. It gives us more information about this. And look at here. The Teh letter appears as the 3rd and 22nd letter in Arabic alphabets. Arabic alphabet and Abjad order. That's 322 skull and bones. And of course, we know that skull and bones cross each other. So again, this smiley face is a version of the cross. So the smiley face becomes the skull. The X becomes the bones. Skull and bones. Let me draw it out for you, for those of you that are more visually inclined, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's the same letter in different forms. we've got the smiley face. Well, actually, let's do this. This is crazy. Crazy. You can't make this up. Smiley face. Let's draw it out. Okay. Here's the symbol. There's your skull. The very same symbol in a different language is the bones. Ever wonder why presidents on both the right and the left just love Saudi Arabia, despite their human rights record? Well, this could be part of the reason why. Now, let's go on, because if you look down here, the verb form of the smiley face means died. D-I-E-D. Dead. Many of you are like, yeah, the smiley face has some dark roots to it. It sure does. Because in Arabic, it means died, the verb form of it. Now, Arabia is the home of Sharia law, where it just so happens that these two eclipses crossed each other in 2 and 6 BC. Right here. We were just talking about this. It's in Yemen, but it's on the Arabian Peninsula. Okay? And it forms the Tav, the Hebrew form of the word Teh that we just looked at. And the letter, it crosses here at a place on the earth called Marib, and we covered that in a previous video. And it happened at the birth of Christ. Marib, there was the world's oldest dam was built there. And it broke several times. Dams breaking is a metaphor for birth. The water breaking. Birth. Now, what does this all mean? Well, in order to find this out, we got to look deeper into the deeper meanings of the ancient Paleo Hebrew. The X-Tav, we're going to start designating this by its form, right? So it's easier for you to remember if I call it the X-Tav. We're going to find out why the Arabian equivalent was evolved into an eclipse smiley face. Now, the ancient Hebrews, let's pull this up here. Now, I got to give Mark some credit for this, because Mark is all over these letters, these Hebrew letters, the Paleo Hebrew letters. Mark's channel is Yahuwah's Word is King, and it's on the front of my YouTube page in the recommended channels. And he talks all about these Hebrew letters. Now, someone had commented on my channel and they're like, Mark thinks that Jesus is the devil. No, Mark doesn't think Jesus is the devil. But he's got a video on there showing the form that we are shown of the image of Christ and how it is incorrect. It doesn't jive with what the Bible says. Okay? Now, Mark takes a more aggressive approach. I tend to not like to talk about the race of Jesus because that's, to me, is divisive. But that's Mark's prerogative, and he stands by it about the true appearance of Christ. So that's all he's saying. Mark is not Antichrist. So I just want you to know that before you go to his channel. So this is all interesting because we're talking about a mark, are we not? Now, let's keep going with this. The ancient Egyptians used the X-Tav as a tally mark. And basically, before that, Cain's bloodline was marked. It says in the Bible that God set a mark upon Cain. And would use the Tav, they would use the Tav, and Cain's bloodline would use it, the shape of the X, as two sticks to mark a target when aiming the plow in the field. Because remember, Cain's bloodline were the farmers. And this plow was being pulled with a beast. Now, wrap your brain around this, because we all know that farming is a metaphor for sexual reproduction. You plow the field, which is the act itself. You lay the seed, and then the seed grows up. Well, that whole thing is indicative of the beast in Cain's bloodline. He was the farmer. The beast was what is ruling his seed. Is it all starting to make sense now? And at the end of the field, at the edge of the field, he would set upon it this mark, which is an X-Tav, so that he could aim the rows, right? It's the mark of the beast. Now, do you see why the coming of Christ was signified with this X eclipse? Do you see the significance of that now? It's because he came to undo the curse of the beast. This is fascinating. Let's read this here. The word plowshares in the passage above, let's move this up a little bit, is the Hebrew noun, which appears in the Hebrew Bible 5 times. A plowshare is the metal point of a plow, which digs into a coil, creating a furrow for planting seeds. Let me show you the image of this so you can wrap your brain around it. There it is right there. Look, there's the X-Tav and there's the beast. This article is all about this. I'll link this below. You want to read this? A plowshare is the metal point of the plow, which digs into the soil, creating a furrow for planting seeds. When we examine the original pictographic script used in ancient times to write Hebrew, we can see a clear connection between the letters of this word and its meaning. The modern Hebrew form of the letter Aleph is that symbol here, but is an evolved form of the original pictograph, which looks like a beast. It's an ox head right here. A picture of an ox head. The ancient pictograph form of the other letter is this. It's the X, right? A picture of 2 crossed sticks, which are used as a marker. When these 2 pictographs are combined, we have the meaning an ox toward the mark. Fields were plowed with a plow pulled behind an ox or a pair of oxen. In order to keep the furrows straight, the driver of the ox would aim toward a mark, such as a tree or a rock outcropping in the far distance. As we can see, this meaning of driving the ox toward a mark can be seen in the letters of the Hebrew word. So there you go. Laid all out. What all this really means, why Cain was marked because of his bloodline. Jesus came to undo the curse. And what he had to do is bring this mark in the form of a cross, but laid down, it looked like an X. He carried the cross on his shoulder up the hill to Golgotha. They raised it up. He was crucified on it. The X became a cross, nullifying the mark of the beast by believing in him, nullifying the tainted blood of the serpent that infected mankind. You want to talk about an infection? That's the infection. And everything else they're doing is hogwash. Jesus released the curse when he drug that cross up, when he drug the X up the hill. That was the symbolic part of it. And then with his death, it became literal. Now, the early Christian Arabs, under the converted Queen of Sheba, they knew this when they saw these eclipses crossing overhead at the birth of Christ. Down here in Yemen, let's pull that back up so you can get a visual on that. They knew this. This was Yemen right here. on the Saudi Arabian Peninsula where these cross. Why did they know this? Because the Queen of Sheba was converted by Solomon. She stopped worshiping astrology and false gods, and she turned to the one and only true God. They were Christians. Well, they weren't Christians yet because Christ wasn't born. Remember, Solomon was in the bloodline of Christ to come. All this stuff moves forward and backwards in time. Back then, they knew the prophecy of the Messiah to come. Now we've lost that. They try to whitewash the Old Testament, erase the history that it was talking about a Messiah to come. But if you were to go back into these times, everybody knew that the Old Testament was talking about a Messiah to come. They just knew it. And the Queen of Sheba would have known it too, because she was speaking to the most wise man in the entire world, Solomon, who was gifted wisdom by God because he asked for it instead of riches. Are you starting to see what's going on now? So these early Christian Arabs, under the Queen of Sheba who was converted, they knew what this meant when these eclipses crossed overhead at the birth of Christ. This may have even been the sign that the wise men saw. If you think about it, how did they know? How did, what was his name? Herod. How did Herod know for sure that this was the birth of Christ happening? To the point where he wanted to kill all the firstborn. How did he know? There was a sign. Was this the sign? Crossing eclipse over the dam of Marib, the ancient dam? I don't know. But it's fascinating to contemplate all this. Now, it gets even crazier. Because not only was this eclipse a possible, or this pair of eclipses, a possible harbinger, but when Islam swept the world hundreds of years after this, remember, Islam came after Christianity. They imposed Sharia law, and they turned the X-Tav symbol into the smiley face. And what that did is it concealed the true X-eclipse origins that revealed the truth. And they hid it behind the smiley face of death, which of course is another eclipse path shape that brings death, as I demonstrated earlier in the show. So what is this about? The beast wants your soul. It's all playing out now with these forced Sharia masks around the world. The final submission of mankind to the beast. Here's an article on Sharia law. As you can see, the hijab is part of it. Punishments: whipping, stoning, amputation. You want to make a stand? You want to follow a true Christian leader? They would disassociate themselves from the Saudi royal family, but instead they commune with them. You want a true Christian leader? The ending of pregnancy stops tomorrow. You make a stand, a firm stand. You want to follow a true Christian leader? Elite trafficking ends today. You go into Hollywood with this National Guard and you start making arrests of producers, directors, actors. You want to make a true stand and follow a true leader of God? Even if it costs you the election, you are very clear about what you stand for, even if you can't do anything to change it. that's the show today. We'll be back on here tomorrow. And I can't even remember what we're going to talk about tomorrow. But we'll be back on here. I love each and every one of you. Have a great day, you guys. Take care and be safe.